Let's call the meeting to order since we do have a quorum. Before we get started, let's introduce everyone on this meeting. The very late Sandy Brock. When I call your name, please confirm that you can hear me by verifying that you are present. We'll start with the commissioners. Jonathan.
I am present.
And Betsy.
Present.
And our other commissioners are not with us tonight. We have our staff, Leah.
Present.
And Jan.
She's on an MACC course.
Oh, good. We'll talk about that later because a couple of folks in my company is teaching a class this week. So we'll go through the speakers, just again, checking in to see if you can hear me and if we can actually hear you. For Pine Street, Travis Yandow, if that's correct.
Yep, that's correct. I can hear you.
All right, great. And for 244 Worcester Street, there's 5 people listed here. I'll start with Richard.
He's not
Okay,
here.
he's not here. Charles is here. Can you
I'm
hear
here.
me okay?
Yep.
Is there anyone else on your team that's
Yeah.
Sam is here?
Sam, I mean, yep. I'm here.
Okay,
Confirm.
all right. Anyone else from your team on the line tonight?
I don't
Doesn't
believe
look-
so.
Doesn't
Okay,
look like it.
all right, then I will not go through the other names. Okay. This open meeting of the Conservation Commission is being conducted remotely via Zoom pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order as extended on June 15th, 2021 and February 12th, 2022. Access information for the public has been provided on the town website. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. If you're using a dial-in by telephone feature, you can mute yourself by pressing *6. As chair, I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. Please note that you will not have screen sharing privileges, but staff can display any visuals per your cue. After speakers conclude their remarks, I will invite each commissioner by name to provide any comments, questions, or motions. After the commissioners have spoken, I will allow public comments to be spoken by participants. Participants must use the raise hand feature by clicking the hand icon at the bottom right of the Zoom menu bar to indicate that they would like to speak. If you're using the dial in by telephone feature, please press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute when you are called on. Participants who raise their hand will be recognized one at a time by their name and then will be promoted to speak. Public comments will be followed by commission and applicant responses. Finally, each vote taken will be conducted by a roll call vote. As a reminder, the commission is concerned with state and town wetlands and stormwater regulations. Concerns outside this purview need to be addressed to appropriate boards. For example, road conditions must be addressed with the select board and traffic concerns must be addressed with the planning board. Okay, so since we're running behind, I will jump right in. So Leah, starting public hearing for Pine Street.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Pursuant to the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Grafton Wetlands Protection Bylaw, Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing to act upon a request for determination of applicability for the installation of a gas main at Pine Street, Grafton, Mass. The application materials and so forth have been posted on our town website. Having said that, who is here to speak for the applicant?
Senator, that's I, Travis Yando.
Oh, all right. So if you'd like to give a presentation.
Sure. Lee, am I able to share my screen? I thought there was some language in there that I may.
You can't, but I'm pulling it up right now.
Okay. I had like a short PowerPoint presentation, but that's okay. This will work too.
Yep. Yeah, you just, just the way the Zoom is set up for Grafton, anything like that in the future, just go ahead and send it to Leah, and Leah and Jan are really great about coordinating all of that.
Okay, understood. All right, so thanks for taking the time meeting with us. My name is Travis. I work for SWCA as a project wetland scientist, and I'm here representing Eversource for the request of determination of applicability for the proposed gas main installation project on Pine Street. So as kind of we get going here with the project location, so this project is specifically along Pine Street in Grafton between Westboro Road and Sentinel Drive. As you can kind of see in the map, Sentinel Drive is over to the left a little bit. The proposed work is located within an existing roadway layout. In terms of resource areas and regulations, so this work is within the 100-foot buffer zone to bordering vegetated wetland and also the 200-foot riverfront area associated with Axtell Brook. You can see Axtell Brook is kind of on the top of the screen there. The project is proposed as a minor buffer zone / like riverfront activity under the WPA, so not required as an NOI for that purpose there. However, the town of Grafton Wetland Protection Bylaw does not include the minor buffer zone activities, hence the RDA we are filing. In terms of project details, so the project consists of installing approximately 1,200 linear feet, so that whole length of that red line there you can see, of 6-inch high density polyethylene gas main. The pipeline will be installed via Eversource's conventional open trenching. So basically what that entails is excavating 30 inches wide, 58 inches deep, side casting the spoils adjacent to the section that they're working at, laying down the pipe, joining them together, and then backfilling and repaving at the end. Basically the purpose is to connect two existing mains that are along Westboro and Sentinel Road, to improve, system reliability and efficiency. In terms of temporary impacts, so there is proposed temporary impacts, approximately 1,950 square feet of riverfront area and temporary impacts to approximately 1,500 square feet of buffer zone. In terms of these temporary impacts, it's already existing paved surfaces and it will be restored to pre-construction conditions. So no permanent impacts to any wetland or buffer zone or buffer zone than what's already existing there. Eversource has a bunch of best management practices used. I had included some in the into the RDA application, but to go in a little bit more detail here. So no work beyond the erosion control barriers. You can see the erosion control barriers in the purple line along the project area. No storage of fuel or overnight parking of vehicles within 100 feet of the buffer zone or 200-foot riverfront area. We try to practice good housekeeping, so trash and debris is cleaned up, no dumping. They have spill kits with their contractors. And then in terms of planning and sequencing, we'll be installing all the erosion controls and catch basin protection prior to any ground disturbance work. And again, just to reiterate, for restoration, all temporary disturbance will be restored to pre-construction conditions. SWCA will also be performing weekly compliance monitoring throughout the duration of the project. So we'll be out there kind of inspecting and communicating with the contractors and just as oversight for the project. So yeah, in conclusion, we anticipate the project will take roughly 2 to 3 months to complete. BMPs will be implemented throughout the duration of the project, like I said, with also inspections from SWCA. The project is all supposed to be accessed from the roadway as the work is within the roadway, only temporary impacts. So with that, Eversource just kindly requesting for a negative determination at this time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I just have a couple of quick ones, and then I will check in with the other commissioners.
Sure.
So obviously this is down where the MBTA commuter rail station is,
Correct.
and it goes across that bridge.
Yep.
In very simple terms, how are you going to hang the the gas line on the bridge. I'm just wondering if anything pushes out beyond the pavement, as previously stated, because of that bridge.
Yeah, so I kind of had anticipated this question and confirmed with our engineers and our supervisor for this work. Basically, my understanding is it won't be off to the side. There's already like existing hangars that are there for additional pipeline and utilities such as like this. So they will be running right across the side of the bridge on hangars where it's already holding utilities of some sorts.
Okay. And then once it gets beyond the tracks and the bridge structure, it then goes underground again?
Yes. Yep.
All right. As far as other questions from other commissioners, Betsy, do you have any questions on this? You're still on mute?
No specific questions, thanks.
All right. Jonathan?
Nothing from me.
Okay. Leah, any comments and your recommendations?
I had two comments. One is for the commission. We do have a spot right here. You guys can see my mouse, right?
Yep.
So right here, the pipeline just touches the edge of the no disturb zone. So I didn't know if you wanted to require a waiver request if it's just overlapping the boundary. We haven't really encountered that before. And then my other comment was that the erosion control here is going through the no disturb. So if it's possible to shift that outside the no disturb or just to that edge.
So that's going along the sidewalk. Is that so? Travis, is that within the paved areas or within the sidewalk?
So the installation of the pipeline will be a combination of both between being within the sidewalk and the pavement. The erosion controls would be installed just on the edge of the sidewalk, within like the vegetation area, but there would be no ground disturbance outside of the sidewalk or the paved area.
Okay. Anything else, Leah?
That's all I had.
Okay. All right. Can we open it up to the public? So this is your opportunity to have any comments. If anyone wants to raise their hand, they can. If you have questions or comments on the gas installation on Pine Street. All right, as we continue through the process, we'll monitor the attendees, and if anyone does have any questions there, feel free to raise your hand and to ask those questions. All right, so other than Leah, a couple conditions around that 25-foot. So let's talk about that really quick. So this is a little bit unusual because that 25-foot is not only just disturbed, but it's within the right of way and within a sidewalk, or it's on the edge of the sidewalk. As you said, it's coincidental to the line for the erosion control. I guess my suggestion would be to make sure that when they install the erosion control, that is right at the edge of the sidewalk. I mean, typically a sidewalk is actually pitched towards the road. So one question, what is the type of erosion control that they're proposed on the plans?
I don't know if I remember. Let me look.
So Travis, what is the erosion control on the plants? Is it
Typically we use straw or compost wattle.
okay? So it's a wattle. So if you can just stake it just as at the very edge of the sidewalk.
Yep.
And actually have the wattle partially on the sidewalk.
Yep.
Just so we're not going into that 25-foot no disturb.
Understood.
So specifically on the 25-foot no disturb, Betsy, do you have any comments on that, or is that okay?
I'm going by Leah's recommendation.
Okay, and then Jonathan, any kind of comments on that location?
It's on the line, not over the line, and like we saw the site plan. I don't know if you zoom in is if it actually breaches the line or if it's. I don't know if there's a precedent that we've set in the past. I don't think I've encountered this in my time with Conscom. So
Yeah.
I kind of defer to what Leah's thinking there. If it's on the line and it needs the paperwork filed, then so be it.
Yeah, I think the other issue is that and it would be good, Lee, if you could, when you get a moment, if you could bring it up again,
Yep.
just the scale of the drawing and the width of the lines, you're not going to have it accurate. So,
So the 25-foot mark of that symbology line would be the inner edge of it. Just to make that clear.
so yeah, that's, I mean, they're almost looks like they're on top of each other. But the erosion control touches right through it. Now, is this, I mean, obviously this is a GIS created map. Is the BVW and the setback lines, are they located in the field?
The wetland flags are, yes.
Okay, it's just a matter of when you're using a map like this, where you're using an aerial, to say it's not accurate is being kind, from a perspective of looking whether something's a foot over or not a foot over. So were these plans stamped by a professional land surveyor?
No, they were not.
Okay, so there's a couple ways we can do it. One, we could, and this isn't going to stop us from doing anything. It's more the paperwork and whether or not we vote on a waiver and you complete the paperwork for the waiver afterwards. That's really what we're talking about. In general, on an RDA where you have a utility going through, a public road within the paved area, it's fairly straightforward. It's really just our local regulations, and we just don't want to create something where we don't go through the process and perform the waiver, even though we would grant it. I mean, that's really what we're doing. We're just talking about semantics here as far as making sure we're consistent with how we enforce our local bylaw.
I understand. I just have like one question. Like, because it's a 25-foot no disturbance zone and that area has already been pre-disturbed with the road, and we are restoring it back to temporary effects or to pre-existing conditions. I don't know if that
Yeah, I
really
mean,
changes anything or.
Yeah, as far as the fact that we understand that it's a matter of the paperwork. So
Okay.
so basically, we're going to take a vote on it, and I'm not going to presume anything, but I think I know which way it's going to go. Leah, is there anything? And then they can follow up afterwards with the paperwork.
Correct. Yeah, it's the paperwork and there's a fee associated with a waiver request. I believe it's $50.
So
Okay.
it's more just you're in that zone, and we just want to make sure that we're consistent in how we apply it. That's all. So, so the question to you is, would you like to request a waiver for that particular area of the project where you're stepping into the 25-foot by just a little bit, and you're kind of close in other areas that would take care of the whole site?
Yeah, sure. Let's do that.
Okay, so we have a request from the applicant for that. So why don't we do a quick motion on that specific item? Do I have a motion?
Oops, am I muted? No,
No,
I
you all set?
I'm just a little bit confused, so I want to get the language right. So I'm making a motion for a waiver,
To grant a waiver
to grant a waiver for the specific area in the 25-foot buffer zone, the Pine Street Eversource project.
Correct. So it's working within the 25-foot no disturb
Yeah.
zone. That's what the motion is for.
Yeah.
Do I hear a second?
Second,
We'll do a roll call vote. Betsy,
Yes.
Jonathan,
yes.
I am also a yes, the motion carries. So having taken care of that, no one else from the attendees has indicated they have any questions or comments. And unless Travis, you have anything else to say, we're going to make a motion on determining whether negative or positive.
No other comments. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. All right, do we have a motion to issue a negative determination for this RDA?
I
With
make
the
a
condition, I'm sorry, with the conditions Leah had outlined.
Yes. I make a motion for a negative determination of this RDA with the conditions put forth for the no disturb zone.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second,
All right, we have a motion and a second. We'll do a roll call vote. Betsy,
Yes.
Jonathan,
yes.
I am also a yes. Issued a negative determination. So Travis, if you can follow up with Leah afterwards to make sure that everything's taken care of with the waiver. But other than that, you understand what a negative determination is. Good luck.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time. Have a good
All
evening.
right. All right. You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right. All right, next, Leah, next one is 244 Worcester Street.
Mhm.
Okay. Catching up a little bit. All right. Pursuant to the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act, the Grafton Wetlands Protection Bylaw, and the Grafton Stormwater Management Bylaw, Conservation Commission will act upon a notice of intent, application for Grafton Wetlands Bylaw permit, and application for Grafton Stormwater permit for the construction of a distribution facility at 244 Worcester Street. And who is here to discuss that?
This is Chuck Karen, and we also have Sam Hemingway, who's the engineer for the project.
You're up.
Okay, if Leah could pull up the plan, I think just the overview plan might be all we
Okay.
need. If you remember, we were before you, I think in early November. I've lost track of the dates. I think it was back in November.
I think it's actually September.
Was it?
I believe so.
Heck, I don't even know what year it is, so pick a
Yep.
date.
And we presented the project at that point. Then we've been basically continuing constantly as we worked our way through issues that have been raised by the planning board and worked through the peer review from Graves. There've been some changes on the site as a whole, but the area within the commission's jurisdictional area, there've been maybe a pipe size has changed somewhere, but that's about it. Everything has stayed the same as we presented previously. I'll run through that quick just because it has been so long. The only wetland that's near the project is over on the west side of the site. In that area, you can see we're proposing a new access drive running in, basically following along the route of an existing pat road that's already through that area. At the front of the site, within the 100-foot buffer zone, there is a single drainage outfall that goes to about 40-ish feet from the wetland. It discharges there, and it's all riprap. Then as we get back to towards the back half of that access drive, it gets partially into the buffer zone. And there's about 8,500 square feet of work, 8,600 square feet, somewhere in that range. in the buffer zone back in that area. I think I think, I don't remember if all three of you were at the site walk or two out of the three of you were. We had a site walk back in late
October,
November,
November, yeah.
November. I think we were trying to get it in before we had any problems with snow cover. We walked out, we walked over, looked at the outfall, then walked back down that existing cart road, and took a look at that in the area of that rear wetland. That rear wetland, is just a strange area to me. The whole area was disturbed, I'm assuming back in the World War II range. Very unnatural topography, and that wetland sitting up there on that disturbed area way above the adjacent wetland. Kind of very, very ephemeral, I always get in trouble when I say this, not much of a wetland, but it is there. It has wetland vegetation, has hydric soil and the hydrology, so it is a BVW. And the topography is actually kind of almost pitched away from it. It's very gentle slopes in that area, kind of irregular topography. So basically, since our original presentation, the work in the buffer zone is essentially stayed the same as it was. Fairly, for a project of this scope, the amount of work in the buffer zone is pretty minimal, in my opinion.
Yeah, just also remember, we also issued the permit for stormwater.
Right. Yep, that's right. Yep.
So that's not a small thing.
No, that's true. So like I said, that the stormwater has all been gone through, been peer reviewed by Graves. I can let Sam discuss what the changes that have happened. We've been held up for a while and haven't gotten back to one of the main, I think the only outstanding issue is improvements that the planning board wants made to Worcester Road. Talking about putting in more sidewalk potentially, and putting in a turning lane back at the eastern entrance. I think that's getting closer to resolution, but there's still a bunch of things to work through between the planning board and then getting Mass DOT on board with everything, and getting that design to their standards. So we're at the point with that we feel that we should proceed with getting the main project approved through the commission. And then once we've worked through everything with Mass DOT on those road improvements, we'd either come back with an amendment, or I think, given the fact that it's basically all that would be in the highway right away. And, I think it would make probably more sense to actually file a whole new notice of intent for that portion of the work. But once we know exactly the scope of that, we can discuss with you. It would not even, depending on where that goes, we may not even end up in the buffer zone with it. We're not sure of that yet. Sam, I guess if you could give a quick overview of what's changed on the remainder of the site. Be good.
Yeah, I can certainly do. In regards to the site layout, in general, kind of what occurred, and this is probably more history than it is resource description, but the project had initially envisioned some zoning relief for parking. We believe that the ordinance, the parking ordinance in town is not really directly applicable to the types of tenants that are being proposed at this location. So it became fairly evident not too far into that process that the zoning board was against granting relief on that front. So the decision was made to reduce the size of the building and to park the site in accordance with the zoning bylaw, with full provision of the section of the bylaw that allows for parking to be in reserve. So what we did was we constructed, we have a significant amount of pavement. The parking exceeds what we think generally speaking, what we need. But you can also see on that plan, to the east of the western entrance and around the main parking field in front of the building, there are pretty significant areas of area indicated as parking that is in reserve and will be landscaped and both primarily as meadow mix, but also pretty significant trees being added, through discussions with both the planning board and the abutting property owners to address their concerns. So again, it was a reduction in the building by something in the order of magnitude of about 20% of the building. Increased parking, but reduction of that is reserve area. The stormwater management, I think we went through fairly extensively at our last meeting, but that has not really changed too much. We did submit that through the planning board process for peer review of the calculations by Graves. I think you were forwarded both their initial comments and then our responses to those. So in the response is when that transition from the amount of building and parking area occurred. Because it's reserved parking, 100% of those reserved areas are designed to be impervious. So we think there's necessarily a pretty conservative nature to the stormwater management system that's proposed. It is also wholly compliant with standards, we believe, providing a significant improvement to what's out there. To reach back again, there is a large parking area over about 50% of the site. So although it looks like a lot of pavement, it's a long history of industrial property and a pretty significant parking demand from the plant in its heyday. So I think it was an order of magnitude about 700 parking spaces that are being removed. They'll be actually reconstructed then as the service area to this building and the building itself, as well as those reserved parking areas. So we are providing water quality throughout for the entire project. We're providing significant recharge, primarily at the building area, but also through after treatment in other areas as well. We're discharging to in two directions into the currently occurring discharge locations. The purpose for that was twofold. One was to distribute the runoff as much as practicable to promote recharge, but also to maintain discharges from the property. There's actually the western side of the property goes in the wetland area that we were talking about, goes to the north under the tracks and actually finds its way to Flint Pond, while the property, the eastern portion of the property, discharges over towards the Hovey Pond. And because although obviously there's hydraulic connection, the hydrology is somewhat different, and the considerations, particularly to Flint Pond, were pretty specific and known for this project area. So we felt maintaining those was important. So hopefully that touches on what was going on. I will kind of reiterate what Chuck had said about the entrances and the changes to Worcester Road. We are at this point, we've done pretty significant review of the traffic. We've done an initial reach to Mass Highway. We've gone through a peer review process similarly for the traffic component. That was a very large discussion with the planning board. It was a very deep dive on that. We're confident that the improvements, we have a good handle on what they are and believe they will be well outside of the buffer zones. The wild card is obviously Mass Highway. They won't give a formal review until the approval is granted by the planning board and we can get real construction applications into them. And there is some question about whether things like bike lanes or pedestrian ways or egresses might change things a little bit. So, so big picture, we are confident that we're going to be compliant and outside of regulated areas in terms of resources. But there is some tweaking and certainly a process that needs to go through to do public improvements on what you all know is a very busy highway. So hopefully all that info. One other item I did send in to Jan, and I hope it went on to the board. She pointed out, and this was 100% an oversight on my part, the planning board also pointed it out, The Graves response tied to a specific revision of a plan. That was a change. Effectively, it was a pipe size and configuration change. No change in impervious area or direction of flow or capacity of pipe or hydraulic computations were made. Simply, it was a correction of a drafting area that was submitted directly to Graves. I did not notice it coming through as a comment and collecting that revision, so the plan wasn't redistributed. I sent a clarification to the planning board indicating and highlighting that change. I forwarded that, and that was back in September or something along those lines. I forwarded that document on to Jan as well this afternoon. So again, that area is underpaved areas, but certainly is a part of the project and was a revision made. And we were, you know, we feel like it doesn't impact the specifics of the application that's being made or the request regarding the notice, but obviously you want to bring it to your attention. And if there's some processing or something we need to do to rectify that, we're, you know, without question, we can certainly clarify that and do what we need to. So hopefully that's all clear.
Okay. I just have some general questions in dealing mostly with the stormwater, and that is, in your report, you talk about this being a redevelopment. Well, it's only a portion of its redevelopment. It's actually new development under the regulations. It's a mixed site. So I just want to make sure I'm clear that the portion of the quote redevelopment of the site meets all of the standards for Mass DEP.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
no, we treated it with in terms of runoff reduction and increases in flows. There are significant flows leaving those the project, and we have met those peak runoff conditions. In terms of water quality and recharge, 100% treatment of the proposed improvements is proposed.
Okay. So you meet all your peak and volumes going off site.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Okay. And right. And it's, again, it's standard pre versus post type of analysis.
Yep.
I'd like you to kind of outline what LID, green infrastructure, low impact design, because I don't see a whole lot of anything that would meet an LID definition.
First and foremost, I think the primary component of LID is you know, I think we're mincing words if we don't call it redevelopment. This project is going into a wholly developed and formerly industrial property and reutilizing it to minimize encroachments and expansions towards resource areas and critical zones. So we think that's clearly the most significant portion of the project that is lowering impacts. In terms of the specific to the design, I think the type of development that we're proposing is a little bit limiting towards low impact development as you would characterize in terms of putting in smaller facilities and parking areas. The reduction of pavement, the reserved parking areas are more at scale with a building that is over 300,000 square feet. So the distribution into two watersheds and maintaining two cells within each watershed similarly again was an attempt to distribute the runoff to the extent that's feasible for a project at this scale. And lastly, the recharge of the building portions separate and away from the interior systems was again another attempt to distribute the runoff throughout the property and to replicate to the extent that you can on a property that's 27 acres and more than 60% currently paved. We felt that was a strong attempt to meet those standards.
Well, the other thing to keep in mind, I can't remember the specifics. I haven't done drainage for a while, but many of the low impact development in drainage standards aren't allowed on filled soils or they have to be placed on clean soil. And the soils on this entire site have been heavily disturbed, and most of it looks like fill. So there's several of those potential stormwater features that aren't allowed because of those soil conditions.
But your main way of mitigating rate is an infiltration system. So that's a little bit of a conflict. So just, my humble opinion as far as a facility like this is ripe for doing a lot of green infrastructure. You have so many opportunities on a site like this, especially one that was previously developed. And I think you're selling that aspect of being creative with your stormwater management design. Whether it's, again, you have a whole area that is going to be, basically loading docks, truck traffic, things like that. You also have isolated areas of pavement for, passenger vehicles. That's a right place for doing porous pavement. You have a huge roof with the potential of doing water reuse. You have other opportunities. You're doing a hole in the ground for infiltration. There's a lot of vegetated ways that you can actually enhance that system. So I guess, and enhance the quality of the site. There seems to be like a lot of opportunities here to do that. And I'm seeing a very traditional gray structured into a hole in the ground. So I'm just wondering how you kind of respond to that. We do have in our local bylaw, that you should be trying to use low impact design. Not seeing a whole lot of that here.
But I understand what you're saying. I disagree completely in terms of it's really the scale of the development. There certainly would be ways to identify small areas and improve them, but in terms of the overall function of this property, I strongly believe that the configuration, you'd have to go out of your way to make a system that I don't think would function as well.
Okay. And just as a little bit on my background is I work on extremely large projects, new campuses, industrial sites like this. This is, I do this all the time, and it is the smallest storms, treating things. It is all of that helps. And that's the whole effort of what DEP is doing. This site would not meet the new proposed regulations for DEP. Now you have submitted it now, would not ask you to do that. That's outside of it. But when you look at where the state is going and where our bylaw is, it's talking about a lot of, low impact design. And this doesn't have really much of anything. It's a very, very traditional design. And does it meet the minimum kind of aspect of the current state regulations surrounding stormwater, specifically as it relates to wetlands? It marginally meets it. And I'm asking the question and putting it to you, why can't we do more?
Do you have a specific modification that you would recommend?
I just listed like 4 or 5 of them. I could probably list 10
I
of
don't
them.
agree with them, but I feel like they would impact the function of the site.
And again,
absolutely believe it.
Okay, and that's fine. And again, I'm just trying to put it out there that there's options out there to do this, to look at stormwater in a very different way. This is your project. We review what's in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I am not going to tell you what to do. I am not going to design it for you. I'm just saying that it lacks kind of the intent of what's in the current stormwater standards. It also lacks the intent of some sections of our local bylaw, which is to promote and to include LID. Just not seeing it here. So let me just touch base with the other commissioners and get their opinion, then open it up to the public and so forth. So Jonathan, any kind of added comments?
No, nothing added to what you just said, Sandy.
Okay. Betsy?
No, I think you said it all.
Leah, anything else? I know that you have a pretty long report. Let's kind of go through that. And I understand that Graves has reviewed this and reviewed it for the planning board, and they also do our reviews. So we like to combine the two also. So, and everything that I read through on what Graves had was pretty minor as far as some of the, you know, typos and those type of things that I do agree with. So, Leah, other comments?
Yeah. Okay, so you touched on redevelopment earlier. So the redevelopment area in the north has no stormwater treatment, just a reduction in impervious surface. Our stormwater regs require treatment to be proposed to the maximum extent practicable. So I didn't know if that was something that was going to be explored.
Okay. And can you bring up the plan and kind of
Yeah.
show us where that is?
Do you guys have a certain sheet that the redevelopment area is called out on?
No, I mean, under the regulations, I don't think that the redevelopment as a specific would frankly qualify. I think it was more of a generic term. So that the redevelopment on that portion is really the area around the driveway, around the office building. So those other areas are striping effectively. So that's an existing paved parking lot that is being restriped for the existing employees at the existing plant.
Leah, can you just zoom into that area?
This one, correct?
Yep.
Okay. So you're
Nothing's changing there except to change the painting of the parking spaces
okay.
to make it more efficient.
Oh, understood. I mean, this is a large project and we're looking at the large project in totality. So, so we would not be doing our job if we didn't look at these areas and how it relates to our regulations. So, now you're not removing any of the pavement adjacent to this lot. This is an existing lot in
Correct.
currently out there, and you're doing in the current stormwater features in that parking lot.
Yep. Yeah. In fact, the way that if you look at that, the cross-hatching intent there, the Wyman Gordon, so that is, I'm trying to figure out the right way to word this. So that what has occurred at this property over the years, I mean, it was I don't have to tell you all about the Wyman Gordon operations back in the day, and 1,400 employees, and they're a pretty significant employer. They're consolidating their operations towards their existing building. So that their employees that are parked in the southern portion of that lot, which is another 800 parking spaces underneath our project.
Yep.
They have those employees now that are parked out in the main field out by the guardhouse in the front. They're consolidating them to the north part of their parking lot. They're reconfiguring it so they can cut the lot. They are doing that work themselves for the most part. There was a necessity to provide access around the existing building. So that was primarily fire protection. There are also some utility changes there. And again, it's really about consolidating their operations next to their doors so they could make way for the development. The new development portion is the area that was the focus of this application. So hopefully that helps clarify.
Yeah, and is that is not on your site?
That is, I'm
That's
sorry.
not on your parcel.
No, that's on the Wyman Gordon parcel.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
And does that existing drainage infrastructure, does that pass through your site? Or is it
No.
totally separate?
It's totally separate, but they do have a common discharge point, but they are maintained wholly separately.
And the discharge point is where?
In the upper right corner of that plan. So if you kept going up on the right, you can see the wetland over there. That is a current discharge location through a man-made
Okay.
channel.
And you're also connecting to that same discharge point.
Correct.
Okay, and are you doing work at the pipe to make that connection?
Pipe to make that connection.
So
I don't
there's a
understand the question.
discharge, so you would have a discharge from the stormwater management system of the parking lot that's going to get repainted. And that goes down towards the wetlands, and then you're connecting to the same pipe, or is it a separate discharge point?
They connect at the discharge structure, which
Okay.
basically there are sampling points at those locations. So there's a
Okay.
structure where pipes are combined and sampled separately, and that the common discharge goes out into wetlands.
Okay, and again, I'm just looking for to what what Leah's question had to do is there an opportunity to add some sort of water quality? And I don't think it would be it'd be great if you could meet the regulations, but just some sort of improvement, which is what the regulations do require. But I guess I'm trying to get to is, do you have control over anything that you could even do that with? That's
Yeah,
we can't make you. Yeah,
right. It's very limited. So it's hard to extract these two projects, and it's also very distinct entities. So that there's a Wyman Gordon sale portion there, willing to consolidate their existing operations on a portion of their existing site and cut a line and sell it. But developing changes through the Wyman Gordon process, and they have a strong union, they have a strong operational component, they have a national board that needs to require, and all those changes. It was intended to be extracted from this application for that reason. If there's an issue with the existing Wyman Gordon, that's something that they need to resolve.
right. And you happen to show that location on your plans, hence why
Yes.
we're asking the questions.
Yep. No, I'm not. I'm trying to explain it. I'm not defending it. I'm trying to make it clear to you, and I hope that I am.
Yep. No, it's part of it is control. And obviously, again, it's just, Leah definitely noticed that, hey, you have this area that on this plan, it looks like you're doing a new parking lot.
Right.
As you've already clarified, it's not a new parking lot. It is restriping that makes a difference. And then my questions were about, well, if you have a pipe that goes across, on an easement or something to get to the discharge point, is there an opportunity to drop in some sort of water quality structure? But that was why I was asking those questions.
Yep. No, I understand. And again, I can't speak for Wyman from their standpoint, because they've been there operating in that parking lot for so long. They're very hesitant to do,
Also understand that
those striping, that striping was really shown for the planning board. So
okay.
because there's an obligation to ensure that the existing employees on the remaining property can park in a manner consistent with the zoning bylaws.
Right. And to be honest, that's out of our jurisdiction. You can have as many parking spaces as you want. That's not really what we're concerned about. For us, it's more the stormwater and what's happening with the stormwater. That's where these questions are centered on. So let me just do a quick check-in with the other commissioners to see if they have any other questions around that. Betsy.
No.
And Jonathan. Okay. Leah, what other comments that you had in your report?
I have two other stormwater comments, and they might just be little things that need to clean up on the plan, or maybe they have been cleaned up in the peer review process. One is your TSS spreadsheet for BMP 2B2, which is the east roof, identifies a storm scepter in the treatment train, but it isn't shown on the plans.
Okay, so certainly it was our intent to utilize, although they're redundant treatment, that we were installing them anyway. I think there's 10 of them on the property.
And the other is there a reason why all the drainage lines discharging to the sediment forebay of BMP 1B have storm scepters except the westernmost line?
I'll have to check. I think it had to do primarily with the LUPO component. So we had at the time, and first and foremost, we can look at it and add them to every discharge if you think it's appropriate. But the vehicles parking, we may have not necessitated it because we did have the treatment cell. But in areas that we thought might be subject to higher pollutant loads, we made sure that we had those facilities to provide the extra protection. So we certainly wouldn't have objected. I'm not sure that it would have been a requirement through the treatment train and the calculations, but our intent was to provide them certainly in all higher pollutant load areas. And I thought that we put them in all the parking areas, so I'll have to compare.
Okay.
And don't object to doing it if it's important to the board. We think there's I can't iterate enough. We think there's a very considerable improvement to the conditions out there. We think this plan both meets the objectives that we see or with this particular user and the constraints to the type of use that it is. But we're welcome ways that we can try and incorporate other elements. If they're a concern, particularly.
Did you want me to move on to one additional comment, Sandy?
Yes, please.
The other thing that I have is that because this is a project through the 43D process, actually, I believe it might be before the select board tonight, looking to extend the 180-day deadline to get these permits issued. So their new date they're looking at is April 6th, which would allow us to see this one more time, or maybe two more times. Let me look. We would be able to look at this again on March 15 if needed. We do have another meeting on April 5th, but it would be really hard to turn around a permit in a day. So there was a sheet circulated to have all the chairs sign off on, basically in agreement with them seeking the extension of that deadline. So I just wanted to call that to your attention before it gets thrown in the packet of items for signature.
Okay. So, and again, I mean, I think at this point, it's up to you as far as moving forward. But if you want to keep this this hearing open until you've got your other planning board and everything else, sorted out, so that you don't have to come back to us. I mean, that's, we're happy to, see you again in a few weeks, if just to wrap things up. But that's up to the applicant to make those decisions. So. I don't know what your plans are at this point.
I guess I'd like your input on that to help us make that decision. The things we've discussed tonight, if you think those are things we need to make changes on before you approve it, then we need to continue it. If you think they're things that could be conditioned, then I'm not sure if there's any benefit to continuing.
And it's just, I don't know what other changes by other committees are going to happen, and that's outside of us, but it's more just lining up those processes. And we still need to have any kind of, public comment too on this. And then we actually have started to think about special conditions for this project. And I think it might be worth it, Leah, to go through those special comments.
Sure. Would you like me to do that now?
Special conditions, I would say yes, please.
Okay. All right, so I've Prior to commencement of work, the applicant shall provide a copy of MIPA and also the SWIP. I'm gonna skip over the ones that I have questions on, and I'll come back to those.
Yep.
Prior to commencement of work, the applicant shall submit funds to the commission for construction period peer review inspections of the stormwater infrastructure installation. We do that in coordination with planning so that we don't have to duplicate anything. If the areas of the proposed stormwater basins are to be utilized for temporary stormwater collection during construction, they shall not be fully excavated until that temporary use is over. All work would be phased according to the phasing plan that you guys have sheet for a phasing plan in this plan set. Previously disturbed areas must be stabilized with permanent or temporary measures prior to the disturbance of additional areas. Any slopes steeper than 2 to 1 will be stabilized with erosion control matting. Any slopes steeper than 3 to 1 would be stabilized with tackifier and seeding. The commission can ignore the part about cumulative land disturbance in excess of 5 acres wouldn't be allowed. We need to ignore that because they filed this application before we put that provision in place, so that
Okay.
part would not apply to them.
And so that particular it had been previously a policy of not to open up more than 5 acres. And that had more to do with a lot of different subdivisions that we had severe problems with. On a site like this, it's a little bit different. You're under the SWIP. You've got some other regulations you have to do. I mean, I'm guessing your building's 2 acres.
No, 7, 8.
So I get it, but the reality is once you stabilize the foundation, it's stabilized. So that's no longer. So this is a little bit different. A different site as far as what we typically are looking at for erosion control. Obviously, erosion control is still important, but that particular requirement, we had an active policy previously, doesn't fit well with this type of project. So
Keep going.
yes.
The stormwater infiltration units installed to capture roof runoff shall be maintained in good working order. Should the system become inoperable, a replacement shall be installed or another comparable solution shall be proposed to the commission for review. The applicant shall maintain all stormwater management facilities as described in the O&M plan. The applicant is responsible for inspecting the stormwater facilities in accordance with the O&M plan at a minimum of once per year, and providing the inspection reports to the commission. The applicant shall retain the records to the 5 most recent years on site. You can ignore the latter part of that. I forgot to cross that off. That's talking about subdivisions when that infrastructure gets turned over to the town. So that part's irrelevant. Snow shall not be pushed into or stored within any stormwater management facilities, including but not limited to basins, swales, etc. Any sand and litter left behind after snow melt shall be cleaned up and properly disposed of so that it does not make its way into the stormwater management facilities. The 2 that I had questions on are, is there going to be fencing along the western edge of the site?
Yes. Along the western parking area, the drive will be maintained. Do you mean between the drive and the resource area, or do you mean between the?
Yeah, I was just trying to establish if there's something already there as sort of a no disturb barrier or not necessarily.
There is a fence there, although it has openings in it. I think from the walk, I think we cut into some of them. So
I think we're further west than that. That existing fence is pretty close to the existing parking. So we're
right. But just in general sense, there is fencing between the parking areas and the wooded areas now. We were not envisioning that there is landscape vegetation along the road. Because that road is primarily a Wyman Gordon access, it's a pretty good separation between the site development and the resource area. So we didn't feel like a fencing was, frankly, would accomplish much.
Okay, so I would ask the commission if you wanted to consider any kind of no disturb barrier or signage along that western edge. And the other one that I was going to put to the commission was any requirements for a bond.
Okay, so as far as the fencing goes, can you describe the type of landscaping that's going in there, or is it? I'm just trying to, you know, to us, a barrier can be many things.
Yep.
It's there to protect the wetlands and there to protect people from cutting and encroaching and things like that. It's.
Yeah, it's, I thought I had the landscaping open. You'll have to bear with me for a minute. So there are, it's primarily street trees along that western road, and I don't see a spacing on them, but it looks to be about 40 feet on center. So street trees 10 feet off of the pavement.
Yep. Yeah. So our concern is obviously, you know, the buffer to the wetlands and making sure that for whatever reason, that 10 feet wide landscape strip doesn't turn into 50 or whatever.
Mhm.
That's, and, you know, there's a wide variety of ways to put in some sort of barrier, and the commission has been very flexible in what that actually means. Whether that's something as simple as a split rail fence, or it could be vegetation that is, you know, is more of, it's just a deterrent on some projects. If it's a ledgy area, they put rocks and so forth. And it's really just so to prevent expansion into the buffer zone and to protect the buffer zone vegetation. That's the purpose of that question. So there's a lot, to us, there's a lot of different ways to delineate that limit of mowing, let's say.
You mentioned signage also. I mean,
Yep.
I'm wondering if that would, I can't foresee why anybody would want to expand over there. I mean, I guess we could always say that.
Yeah.
You never
Yeah.
know. But I was just thinking, you know, if we had signage, that might be.
So,
I don't think the applicant would object to it. I will say, to me, it's pretty clear, having met the group that is Wyman Gordon, that for the applicant standpoint, there's not much reason for them to walk across a road that is effectively,
I get it.
and go the other side. So whatever you think is suitable, where, you know, a split rail fence is, or some linear measure, if you can come up with language that is, that can relay the intent, I don't think there would be any objection to that being a special condition, that we work out something that we think suits the purpose.
We also have a standard sign that we usually put on our no disturb areas, and they're little 4x4 signs. And Leah, what's the spacing?
20 feet, I believe.
Yeah, so
Wow.
that's an option. And that's usually set up for more of a residential lot size. So this would be a little bit different. But
I like the split rail. I think it sounds like it's a good middle ground, and it's very
yep,
clear.
you can, you know, from our perspective, it's just a delineation. And then what you can do is on a couple of the posts, just stick the sign about you can't go any further than this. So you want to have dumping and so forth. So that could be a fairly, you know, easy way of doing that. So, and I think the spacing, because of the length of that road, and because it's not individual lots, it's one large lot, we could probably look at a much different spacing. So, Leah, any questions on that kind of approach?
Just for clarification, you guys want the condition for a barrier and the condition for signage.
Right, and the signage spacing should be every 100 feet or so, just
Okay.
because of the scale of the lot. That 20 feet is done because we have a lot of issues with smaller sites and multiple sites. So, okay. And then as far as the bond goes, it's just to let you know, whenever we are looking at a project of this size, the bond that we are looking for is to complement the planning board bond. We're not looking to complete anything. The only bond that we would put on here would be to stabilize the site. If you get, all disturb is just to stabilize the site. It's not to, we wouldn't finish anything, it's not like a subdivision road. That's not the intent. The bond is just, and yeah, I know that you're going to say it's not going to happen, but something is 10 acres of altered land, and suddenly for whatever reason, something comes up and it's sitting there and it's just not stabilized. That's generally what our bond is. There anything else, Leah, on this site that we would be looking to do other than reestablish a stabilized surface?
Things we usually cover would be erosion control and the stormwater management.
Yeah. So that would be, those are the only type of things that, it's really about. And it unfortunately does happen sometimes when all of a sudden people disappear and the town is left holding the bag, so to speak. So, so Leah, can we have a conversation with the planning board to see exactly what they are doing for a bond on this particular site? And again,
Yeah.
we're not, our intention is not to overlap at all. It's to work together so that if there's if, as an example, planning board already has something in their bond that relates to stabilization, well, we're not going to do that. Also, we want to complement it and work together. So, let me just check in with the commissioners really quick about if they think of any other, pretty much any other conditions that we want to talk about. Jonathan?
No, I didn't have anything.
Okay, Betsy?
No.
Yeah, and again, we're just going through these are the special conditions that we're thinking of that would be added to the standard boilerplate conditions that DEP has. And just, just checking to make sure that if, as simple as, it's the barrier, we don't want to tell you, you shall buy this or whatever. It's like, this is the intent of it, and we'll work with you to make sure that that intent is met. That's so
Oh.
before we,
All makes sense.
yeah, before we get any further, I'd like to, I know there was several attendees on here. If anyone has any questions or comments from the public, please feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions on the discussion we have, or if you have any questions specifically as it relates to wetlands or any of the stormwater, please feel free to raise your hand, and between Jan and Leah will recognize you and you'll be able to ask those questions. If you decide to, please raise your hand at any time. We will continue kind of our discussion. So Leah, as far as graves go, it looks like their review is pretty much done.
Correct.
Okay, and as far as like some of these conditions, it looks like as far as the special conditions, we'll be able to come up with some of them. Is there any other reasons to continue the hearing or ask the applicant to continue it?
Really, just like you said, if the design were to change with a different board, but they're pretty close with
Right.
planning.
Let me do as we kind of see if anyone has any questions from the public. I'll go around one more time with the commission. Betsy, do you have any other comments, questions on this project? It's a large project.
It's huge, and I'm trying to keep up, but I think everything that
It's a big
without
building.
an engineering degree, trying to keep up. But I remember this site walk very well when I've been paying attention. So
Yep.
I think you've stated it all.
Yeah, it may be a big building, but it's just like any other site. People get fooled when things get really big. They think it's something special. No, it's still basic engineering. It's
Yeah.
still how you look at it. Stormwater can be, in my opinion, stormwater here could be improved, but they are meeting the regulations. So that's me asking to look a little bit beyond what the traditional stormwater is then. But that's what's in front of us, and that's what we're reviewing. Jonathan, any other questions or any potential? I can't think of any other potential special conditions that would be under our jurisdiction for.
I think what you and Leah rattled off is what I thought through. And then some. So
Yep.
like Betsy, it's a big building. I'm trying to wrap my head around the notes and the site walk and everything. So
It will change the view going out 122, which I do every morning. So, but it's zoned for it. It's the planning board does their thing. We do ours. I mean, this is a long history with this site, and they've been in front of us, Wyman Gordon, many times, and a lot of that was dealing with some of the issues they had on site with different pollutants and so forth.
We do have a hand raised from the public.
Got a couple, so go ahead, Leah.
All right, so I hit allow to talk, so you should be able to speak.
All right.
Rosemarie Belanger, 10 Fairlawn Street. I am in a butter, and we've been, I and a group of concerned citizens have been at every meeting. And Sam mentioned, I have a bunch of questions, so bear with me. Sam mentioned pollutants. I'm wondering, Sam, if you can talk about what you meant.
Primarily, the regulations speak to TSS, so loading of sands and silts. But obviously nitrates and phosphorus are the primary two that are addressed by stormwater.
So just one other to kind of add to that. So to understand the TSS, which is correct, the total suspended solid, the way that DEP looks at it is that pollutants tend to attach to it. And in this case here, it's mainly vehicular potential pollutants, as Sam mentioned, just to understand that there are other things like salting and sanding, which Leah had kind of mentioned, which we're concerned about, is that those type of gray structured type of water qualities only remove TSS to a certain percentage. They do not remove any salt or anything, but that is true on any roadway or any other project. So.
Yeah, thanks for that explanation. I'm basically a layperson. I'm a business person, so the engineering jargon just goes right over my head. So thanks for explaining that.
Not a problem.
I'm wondering if there's any, are there trees that are going to be removed from the site? I know that we've discussed that in the past, but I'm unclear whether or not there's going to be tree removal.
So as far as the Conservation Commission goes, and as far as our jurisdiction is, so obviously we're looking at the wetlands, potential impact to the wetlands. We also are looking very closely at the buffer zones, and the buffer zone is the area of 100 feet from the edge of the bordering vegetated wetlands out, and that's a jurisdictional area. So when we look at vegetation and the whole discussion about the driveway and a barrier there, that was about vegetation as it relates to the wetlands to protect it. We're also interested in vegetation as far as how it relates to stormwater. But as far as like looking at particular trees and landscaping, that's more under the purview of the planning board. So as it relates to the wetlands, we're very interested in it, and we want to maintain that vegetation in and around the wetlands to protect it. As far as the number of trees as buffers and so forth, although that helps to enhance stormwater aspects and it helps to green the site, it's really in the purview of the planning board. So.
Got it. Thank you. the size of the building, I mean, we all know the size of the building. Is that any kind of a concern for stormwater management? I mean, how you just deal, there's a lot of concrete. You know, obviously it's a field right now, so the water just goes into the soil. I'm not an engineer, but you know, when you think about these large developments, how do you deal with the stormwater? I mean, how?
It's a great question, and I'll try to explain kind of the basics of it. So when you look at, and we follow the regulations, we both have some a local stormwater bylaw regulations. We also follow the Mass Department of Environmental Protection's stormwater manual. So those are kind of the rules that we look at. So you take a site as this one here, which has a certain amount of development on it, and that's the existing condition. So you, through some modeling and some different ways of looking at different storms, you approximate what the runoff is, and that's both in the rate of runoff, which is the way you would say that is like if you have a thunderstorm and the rain hits a pavement and it runs off, that's kind of the rate of something going off. The other component that's looked at is the volume of runoff. So the volume of runoff is just that, what hits it and that volume that runs off. So when you take, in this case, those old, the existing grass fields, and you would have it rain on that, you know, you would have a certain amount of runoff after, depending upon the intensity of the storms. There's good soils there, but you have a certain amount of rate of runoff, but you also have a certain amount of volume. So the state regulations, our local regulations require that you cannot increase the rate of runoff, meaning you can't send more water faster to the abutting properties. We also have, in the state level, you're supposed to approximate the volume. Under the local regs, we have to meet the volume. So that's where they're putting in that large basin to do infiltration. They're fortunate that they have good soils there. So that's kind of the component of both the rate or the quantity of the water that hits the ground. The other component that stormwater is looking at is water quality. So if you have rain that hits a parking lot and there's vehicles on it, you have the potential, as I was talking before, about, you know, pollutants from those vehicles, just like you would have in the roadway or anyplace else. And we want to collect as much as we can. It's funny from a water quality perspective, when you have a large roof, as long as those roofs are, you know, don't have a lot of, you know, mechanical equipment on top of it, the runoff from the roof is relatively clean compared to what falls on the surface. However, you still have, you know, deposition from the the air and so forth. You pick up some pollutants, but and generally in Massachusetts, the way you look at runoff from a building, there's some requirements in the regulations if it's certain types of metal roofs and so forth. I'm guessing your roof on here is flat roof, and it's, you know, a gravel type of whatever. So you don't have that condition here. So yes, whatever falls on that big building, we want to make sure that they're capturing it, making sure that they're mitigating that increase of impervious. It's all about the imperviousness on the site. And then for all the parking lots and everything, we want to make sure it's treated. It has, there is a treatment train and there's water quality systems on that. So that's kind of what we'll look at. Just another piece of information. If you've been to all these meetings, you probably heard we talk a lot about peer reviews. So we use the same peer reviewer that the planning board does. And so when they review, they do. So we have, on the conservation side, we have two different peer reviewers. One is to look at the wetlands delineations. The other peer reviewer is a civil engineer that looks at the stormwater. And so that's when we were talking earlier about when I asked Leah that Graves Engineering has reviewed it, and there's usually a back and forth between the applicant and the peer reviewer. That's all been taken care of through both the planning and conservation. So
I have a couple more questions, if the board would bear with me. What about the impact of the emissions from diesel on the wetlands.
So,
And, yeah.
okay, sorry, please finish your question before I jump in.
No, I mean, it's really, one of our major concerns are the emissions, but
Yep.
I'm, wondering, there's habitat in the wetlands. I'm sure there's a lot of habitat in the field that's going to move, somewhere else, but what is the impact? This is probably the least green type of project that you could possibly imagine in a neighborhood. So what will be the impact of the diesel emissions on the wetlands?
So typically, as a Conservation Commission, we do not get into the air quality of the diesel trucks. However, this site, based on the size of it, it will have to be going through, do you have a mandatory EIR on this? Or just an ENF?
It just had an ENF and MEPR issued a certificate saying we didn't have to do an EIR.
Okay, so just to explain that process, just to let you know that someone is looking at the CO2 and the emissions and the impact on the environment and what other permits are needed. So during, so I'll demystify some of the alphabet soup. ENF is environmental notification form. So that is required when you hit certain thresholds. Part of that threshold has to do with trips and traffic and the type of traffic. And then as far as that, you typically, depending upon what you're meeting and what you're doing, you have to do a greenhouse gas analysis. But that's done on the state level. That's not something the Conservation Commission gets involved in. But I guess what I'm saying is there's other processes that does. It's a good question. So it's appropriate, but it's not something that we look at specifically as how it impacts wetlands. Mainly because wetlands, they do a lot of good for a lot of pollutants because they
Right.
treat it and they actually take the uptake of the CO2. What I am saying is there's other folks that would be looking at that. And it's
Okay.
based on the trucks. And did you submit your ENF prior to the updated MEPA regulations that came out in January?
Yes, yeah, we did this last fall. We're in the
Okay.
transition, but not well
Okay.
part of the regulations.
Right. And again, there's some new regulations through the MEPA stands for Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act. And so it's a state regulation, the state agency that runs it. And so they've just made some other changes where they actually talk about resilience, and they've gotten into different areas that environmental justice that focus on if you're in an area of a population that has, there's a whole list of folks or areas that are subject to that, where they actually look at the emissions and so forth much closer. But the short answer is that's not something the local Conservation Commission typically looks at.
Wonderful. And one last question. Are you going to be removing the snow?
So you might have heard earlier. So as far as the Conservation Commission is, when we look at and the planning board has a little bit different take on when they talk about snow and storing snow on the site and things like that. So we will have a condition in our once we issue what's called an order of conditions, which is our approval, we will have a condition on there that snow cannot be placed in any of the stormwater facilities. Again, that's to prevent, dirty snow and salt and other things to go into those. We also have that they cannot place the snow in or store the snow in our 100-foot buffer zone. Again, that's to protect the wetlands. So from our perspective, the snow and where they actually store it on site, we just want to tell them where they can't put it. As far as kind of snow storage areas, that's another conversation for the planning board also.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for all your explanation. I really appreciate it.
Not a problem. This is your opportunity to ask questions, so it's part of what we do here, so. All right, Leah.
We have another attendee. I'm gonna hit allow to talk.
Hi, thank you. My name is Amy Thornton. I live at 15 Maplewood, which is directly across the street from Wyman's. And I want to say, Sandra, thank you so much for explaining these things. You have been above and beyond helping us understand the impact that this is going to have. I just have a few questions. Earlier, and mine also has to do with the snow and the salt and the things like that that'll be put down. Earlier, I thought it may have been in your conditions that you did say it can only go in certain places or may need to be removed if necessary. Is there somebody in town that monitors things like that to make sure that that's being done? Are there like periodic checks on the, you know, on the water?
You know, it's a great question. And to be honest, I mean, you can see here we have Leah and Jan as our staff. We're actually really lucky in Grafton to have 2 folks that help us with the wetlands permitting process, which is great. Depending upon the location of the site, we do not have the staff to go out and routinely inspect every single one of projects that have certain conditions.
Right.
This particular project, you know, is easily seen. So, you know, it's one of those things, this would be a more likely site if I happen to be driving by, or Leah or Jan or anyone else on the commission or any of the abutters could see if they were, for some reason, stockpiling mounds of snow in the wetlands. That would be something, but we would not typically go out. We do not have the staffing to go out after, I'm talking after the construction. As you might have picked up on, is that we did ask that we're going to have our peer reviewer, that engineer, go out and do inspections during construction. So they are our eyes as far as the stormwater being put in.
Okay.
If we see
No,
something, we'll take care of it, but
or if one of us sees something,
absolutely.
we can call the town, which I can
You got it.
guarantee is going to happen. Thank you. Also, too, I would imagine that this is the case, but say the property gets sold, like the developer is promising a lot of things that are going to happen once this property is up and running, but he's probably going to sell the building to somebody else. So do these conditions follow the owner?
So
like whoever's the owner of the building, I'm hoping will have to abide by these rules.
Yeah. So that's a great question. And so the way to kind of explain that is a lot of the conditions that we're talking about are for construction, during construction. So at the end of construction, the applicant would need to close out what's called the order of condition with what's called a certificate of compliance.
Mhm.
So that's the opportunity to make sure that the site was constructed, you know, for us specifically, the stormwater was constructed per the, you know, per the plans. A part of our standard conditions that we request an as-built, so that we make sure that everything was put in per the plan. So that's kind of the construction part of it. So a lot of the things that are in the order of conditions around erosion control, around you know, having certain preventive things as far as a truck wash and these different things. As far as Leah mentioned, that there's a large area that's going to be an infiltration basin if it's going to be used for temporary during construction, all those things. So we will have people out there during construction, and the majority of our conditions are related directly to the construction. If they were to get 90% done on construction and they sell the property, anyone else coming in, they would see on the title that the certificate of compliance hadn't been issued. So that would be brought up. That gets recorded at the Registry of Deeds, and that's a little bit of a check and balance to make sure everything was done per the plans and per the conditions. Occasionally, we will include ongoing conditions. They may be, I'm trying to think, Leah, give me a good example of an ongoing condition.
Maintaining your no disturb zone.
There's
as
a
a no
good one.
disturb zone.
I was just
So-
gonna say that the fence and the signs are
Yep.
essentially an ongoing. It is point out, I don't think, Sandra, you said it explicitly, the order of conditions goes with the property.
Right.
So even if before construction started, if for some reason the property was sold to another developer, the order of conditions stays with the property. They have to. comply with
What
it.
about once the property is done? I'm not talking about construction. I'm talking about, say, like in 3 years, when it's been sold 3 times, the new
And
owners
that's,
have to abide by what are promised, like such, I am also a layperson, but the rain collectors on the roof, they have to be properly maintained. Well,
Yep.
the owner has to do that, but I'm just hoping that there's a way that when this property gets sold, which I'm sure it will eventually, that we're protected as abutters to what was promised to be done.
correct. In a lot of, once you get out of construction and the ongoing conditions, that runs with the property. So both the order of condition is recorded. And when I say recorded, it's recorded at the Registry of Deeds. And so when anyone does a title search, which would happen during a sale, they would list all of the order of conditions. If they've been closed out, they would list all the certificate of compliance. Now, having said all of that, I am not making any promises that every future owner of this property is going to do exactly the right thing. However, all of those conditions remain intact.
Okay.
And so if something does happen 5 years down the road where they're not maintaining something, that's when, as an abutter or a concerned citizen, you can reach out to, the
town.
the town and the conservation. And that's something that it runs with the property. It does. I just
Okay.
want to make sure that the abutters know that even though we'd love to have staff to go out and check everything and all the stormwaters, we don't have that staff.
Right.
And we
I
rely
understand
on,
that.
yeah.
I understand that, and I appreciate the work that you do for us. My last point, I just wanted to, you had alluded to, Wyman's it's obviously been here forever, and they don't have the best track record with their soil. So even though the parking lot, this is a new property which has been tested, the soil at Wyman's hasn't been. So that's why we're very concerned about things like where the snow goes and anything that may be disturbed during construction. So I just wanted to put that on the record.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I mean, when this project first came up, my first reaction is, well, where's it going? And because over the years, I've been on the commission, I don't know, 8 years or 10 years, I don't remember how long. Wyman Gordon has come in front of us at different times, not because they were cleaning up areas because of certain pollutants and certain contaminations from the past. We only get involved with how it impacts because many of it was around the wetlands, and they actually did, previously there were some comments about what the wetlands are. That's because a lot of it has been disturbed and tried to be replicated previously.
Mhm.
So as a conservation commission, we do not handle any type of contamination that goes right to DEP.
Mhm.
We've been involved just because it impacted the wetlands, and they've been
Okay.
doing some replication and some, work on in and around the wetlands as it relates to the different contamination. As far as this new site, as you mentioned, they have to get a clean bill of health. And they perform what's called a 21E, which is an assessment of the site. On a site like this, that I'm guessing you guys have done testing and made sure you worked with a licensed site professional, which is who reviews potential contamination on site prior to them being able to move ahead with it. I mean, that has nothing to do with the town and specifically, but I can tell you that just to get financing, they have to make sure they have a clean bill of health. So not to mention the state is involved in that too. So, but
Okay.
it is a legitimate concern on this site.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. My husband is here. He has a question, but I'm going to let others go first. I'll
Okay.
re-raise my hand, but thank you very much.
You're welcome. Is there anyone else? I don't think anyone else has their hand raised. So if someone else has a question,
No. Okay. Yeah, we're unmuted, right?
Yes, you are. So
Okay,
just
thank you.
name and address and go for it.
Yep, so this is Chris Thornton at on 50 Maplewood Drive. And my question was, in the area where the runoff from the new project ties in and discharges in the same location as the existing parking lot, do they have a calculation on what they expect that volume of water and runoff that's going to be added into that wetland area, and what's the impact on that area?
So the short answer to that is that's part of the analysis that was reviewed by peer reviewer. So absolutely, yes. So on this particular one, you know, what's going there from the existing parking lot is going there. But what they definitely do is look at what that discharge point into the wetlands was previously in the existing condition. And then what they do is they have to model both the existing and the proposed condition to make sure that the rate and volume going to that same location is less than the existing for certain storm events. And that's what's submitted as part of the stormwater report. So that has been reviewed by outside peer reviewers.
All right, well, thank you.
Yep.
That's all I had.
No problem. All right. So we're looking at if anyone else has any, whoops. I'm thinking Amy has just got her hand raised because she didn't take it down yet. Okay, no problem. So so kind of wrapping this up, and is there anything else, Leah, as far as conditions? I think we've talked about that. One last quick, Jonathan, anything to add?
Nothing.
And Betsy, anything to add? Oh, okay. You're on mute. That's all right. I saw you. From the applicant's perspective, is it that you would like us to close the hearing?
Unless Sam thinks there's still something outstanding with the planning board that's going to affect any of this, but my understanding is there isn't at this point. So I think we're at the point.
It's your choice, and if something comes up, you end up doing an amendment
Yeah,
or
then we
something.
have to, right.
Yep.
Sam, you were on board with that?
Yeah, no, I am.
Okay, so do I have, so I would suggest that we have a motion to close the hearing. I think, Leah, as far as issuing the order, I think it would be nice to make sure that you're all set with all the conditions, and maybe we should look at it at the next meeting. Or do you think you got the conditions down enough right now?
I'm clear on everything we discussed, and just, it gets tricky when you do that because you have to issue within 21 days.
I get it. Yep.
So
Okay.
I think I'm clear, though. We discussed everything.
Okay, good. I mean, I can't think of anything else for other conditions. So can I have a motion to close the hearing and issue the order of conditions, and to include all of the conditions as discussed at this hearing tonight? Okay,
All
I
right.
can't make the motion, so.
Right, Betsy, or do you want me to
No,
do
I'll
it?
do it. I make a motion to close the hearing for 244 Worcester Street, noting the conditions discussed during this hearing.
Okay, and we'll issue the order and so forth. So do I have a second?
Second,
All right, we'll have a roll call vote. Betsy,
Yes.
Jonathan,
yes.
I am also a yes. The motion passes. So good luck.
Okay, thank you very
Awesome.
much.
Thank you.
Hopefully
Thank you all.
hopefully the wacky weather doesn't keep on going.
I probably will.
It will.
You're in Massachusetts.
Hey, all I know is the catch basins I've been designing for 30 years don't work. And that's a pretty stark thing to realize how much climate has changed in my career. And it's frightening, actually. So, but all right.
Here, here.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
thanks
you.
again. Take care.
Thank you.
All right, Leah. Do we have any
Action
other?
items?
You got it. We just have the certificate of
minutes?
compliance for Elm Rock.
If you want to skip over minutes, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's do the minutes first.
Okay.
Do I have a motion to approve the February 15th minutes?
Yes, I make a motion to approve the minutes of the February 15th meeting.
All right.
Second.
Thank you. Anyone has any comments or questions or anything to add? I'm seeing shaking of heads. Betsy, anything?
No,
Okay. Roll call vote. Betsy,
yes, approved.
Jonathan.
Yes.
I am also a yes. The meeting minutes are approved. Okay. Max had to show up. So
We had 2 requests for certificates of compliance, 7 and 9 Elm Rock Drive. Both of those lots are complete. Everything's stable. I did go by to check or try to check if grass is growing, but obviously you can't tell right now. The engineer letter says it is, though. The only thing I'm unsure of is if they picked up their erosion control yet or not. Again, can't quite tell because of the snow, but if you guys are comfortable issuing, I guess pending me confirming that with them, then that's the only outstanding thing I have.
Do those
I
have-
think that's reasonable. So
Yeah. Do those have to be separate motions or can it be together?
You can do it together.
just put them together.
All right, so I make a motion. Approve the request for certificates of compliance for 7 Elm Rock Drive and 9 Elm Rock Drive upon confirmation that erosion control has been removed and grass is growing.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call. Betsy,
Yes,
Jonathan.
Yes.
I am also a yes. The motion carries.
All right, and I have one discussion item, and we can make this really quick and easy. So the open space and rec plan chart that we started looking at last time, and then we got a little bit into the weeds on prioritizing tasks. We don't need to do prioritization at all. All we
Okay.
need to do right now is say if there's anything on the list that we don't think should be on our list. So Jan
Okay.
and I took a look through so we could provide our thoughts. We didn't find anything that we didn't feel should fall under us. They do distinguish between if we're the lead on something or if we're a supporting role on something. So things like Betsy called out last time about like historical,
Right.
some project on there about historical things, but we're only a supporting role. I think that's okay because we do have history to conservation lands. So there's a little bit of a tie there. So we were comfortable on a staff level with all the tasks they've given us, but we wanted to get the commission's blessing before we pass it on
All
to
right.
that committee.
I know Betsy had a chance to look at it. I looked through it once. I did not look at it in detail.
yeah.
I don't know if Betsy, if you have anything to add.
Well, I just mentioned, and this is like my sort of being anal organized about things, is that when I have been given, and not even here, just like career wise, is like, this is such an extensive list that if I were going to look at it and do it justice, I was saying that it would have been helpful that things get categorized like under, land acquisition, stormwater, so that all the projects are bucketed under at least categories so you can see where they're alike and where there may be overlap. Because honestly, by the time I got to the back of the list and then to the other items, I was kind of cross-eyed because I was trying to cross-reference things. So I would just say, I guess in the future, that's how I would love to see things. And that's not Jan or Leah's job. It's just, if you want us as volunteers to really put some effort into things, I think it would be helpful to just have that level of organization. And maybe those actions 1A, 2A, 1.2, if I'd gone and sorted, maybe they would fall under that, but I don't necessarily think so. But literally adding a column that gives it a bucket category of, septic, stormwater, land acquisition, requisition, signage, trails, I think would do it justice and make it a much easier project to sort of review and assess.
A more functional working document.
Yes,
So,
that's just my 2 cents worth, sorry.
okay. Yeah, I mean, when I scanned through it, I didn't see anything. So I think, Leah, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
I don't know if Jonathan, you had anything to add to it.
Nope.
But we're gonna-
Jonathan wants to be done now.
I
I
think
do
so.
too. But can I
Okay.
Yeah.
ask if we have to actually do all this work? I mean, that's what bothers me is like, I'm looking at this, I'm like, how are we gonna do this?
We
Can we
can't.
volunteer the people that are absent from this meeting that are on the committee to do all that work
Yeah,
that are, that are occasionally absent?
That's always a good way of doing
I mean,
things. Assignment.
This is usually the trifecta of members here. so.
Yeah.
I make a motion to adjourn this meeting is what I do.
Looking for
Second,
roll call. Betsy,
Yes.
Jonathan.
yes.
I'm also yes, the motion carries.